If you found this audio, it's not by accident. Welcome to Golden Mind Audiobook, a channel for disciplined minds, quiet power, and ideas that change how you think, move, and win. The Quiet Advantage. A manual for building wealth, power, and direction without announcement. Chapter 1. The Discipline of Silence. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is containment. Most people misunderstand silence because they confuse it with passivity. They assume that quiet means inactivity, that stillness means weakness, and that withholding speech means lacking confidence. In truth, silence is not the absence of force, it is the concentration of it. Every serious creation begins in secrecy. Every lasting structure starts where no one is looking. The modern world celebrates noise. People announce plans before they understand them. They speak goals aloud before they have earned the discipline to pursue them. They publish intentions online before they have built the internal strength to sustain them. This habit feels productive, but it quietly dismantles momentum before it has time to mature. Creation does not require witnesses. It requires containment. When an idea is spoken too early, it becomes exposed to forces it is not yet strong enough to resist. Doubt enters. Comparison follows. External opinions begin shaping what should have been shaped internally. Soon, the original vision is diluted, not because it was flawed, but because it was prematurely revealed. Silence is not secrecy born of fear. It is secrecy born of intelligence. A seed does not announce itself before breaking soil. The root system forms in darkness, unseen, uncelebrated, and uninterrupted. Only after it has anchored itself deeply does growth become visible. Wealth, competence, authority, and influence follow the same law. They develop quietly or not at all. The man who speaks constantly is usually leaking energy. The man who is silent is usually storing it. Energy expressed prematurely does not disappear, it disperses. And dispersed energy cannot build anything meaningful. This is why so many people feel exhausted despite constant activity. They talk more than they act. They explain more than they execute. They seek reassurance instead of results. Silence, on the other hand, gathers force. When you stop explaining yourself, something changes internally. You begin to think more carefully. You become selective with intention. You stop performing progress and start producing it. The need for validation fades, replaced by a growing internal standard. This is the first advantage of silence, self-alignment. When you are not busy narrating your life, you hear it more clearly. You notice where your energy is actually going. You begin to see the difference between motion and direction. Many people are busy, but very few are deliberate. Silence exposes that difference. The disciplined mind does not rush to speak. It observes first. Silence creates a private space where thought can organize itself without interference. In that space, priorities become clearer. Weak desires fall away. Only intentions strong enough to survive isolation remain. This is why silence feels uncomfortable to those who lack direction. It forces confrontation with the self. Most people avoid silence because it removes distraction. In quiet moments, excuses collapse. False confidence weakens. You can no longer blame noise for confusion. What remains is truth, about your discipline, your fears, your consistency, and your capacity. This is why silence is the foundation of power. A person who can sit with their thoughts without immediately broadcasting them is a person who can refine those thoughts. Refinement precedes mastery. Mastery precedes results. The second advantage of silence is protection. Not everyone deserves access to your developing vision. Most people will not understand it, not because they are malicious, but because they interpret everything through the limits of their own experience. When they cannot see a path, they assume none exists. Their doubt is not personal, but its effect is real. Repeated exposure to disbelief weakens conviction. Over time, you begin adjusting your vision downward to make it easier for others to accept. You start shrinking goals so they sound reasonable instead of pursuing goals that require growth. Silence prevents this erosion. When you keep your intentions private, they remain uncontaminated. They grow according to your standard, not public approval. You are free to think boldly without defending yourself. You are free to fail privately, learn quietly, and improve without embarrassment. Progress accelerates when ego is removed from the process. Silence also trains patience. When no one is watching, there is no pressure to appear successful before you are ready. You move at the speed of competence, not attention. This eliminates rushed decisions and shallow wins. The third advantage of silence is focus. Speech consumes energy. Explanation drains attention. Every conversation about what you plan to do diverts energy from actually doing it. Silence reclaims that energy and redirects it inward. Focused energy compounds. A mind that is not scattered by external feedback becomes sharper. Decision-making improves. Execution becomes cleaner. The noise of other people's expectations fades, and your actions begin aligning with your internal compass rather than public reaction. This is where quiet confidence develops. Quiet confidence does not announce itself. It does not seek approval. It is felt rather than displayed. Others notice it only after results begin to appear, and even then, they cannot trace its origin. They call it luck. It is not. It is the outcome of sustained internal discipline. Silence also strengthens emotional regulation. When you are not constantly reacting publicly, emotions settle faster. You stop performing outrage, excitement, or urgency. You respond rather than react. This emotional stability is a hidden advantage in business, finance, leadership, and negotiation. The loudest person in the room is rarely the most powerful. They are usually compensating. Power prefers economy. It wastes nothing, especially words. The disciplined individual understands this. They speak when necessary, act when required, and remain silent when silence preserves advantage. They do not confuse visibility with value. Chapter 2. The Mind as a Workshop. Nothing of value appears fully formed. Everything passes through a process. The mistake most people make is believing that this process happens externally, through effort alone, tools alone, or opportunity alone. In reality, the external world only reflects what has already been organized internally. The mind is not a mirror. It is a workshop. What you consistently think, you assemble. What you emotionally reinforce, you construct. What you repeat without resistance, you solidify. Every outcome, financial, personal, or professional, passes through this internal workshop before it appears in physical form. Most people allow this workshop to run unsupervised. Thoughts enter randomly. Emotions attach themselves without permission. Old beliefs continue operating long after they have outlived the usefulness. The result is a cluttered mental environment where unfinished ideas, inherited fears, and borrowed limitations coexist. In such a space, deliberate creation becomes nearly impossible. A disorganized workshop produces unreliable results. This is why effort alone fails so often. A person can work long hours and still produce little of lasting value if their internal systems are chaotic. Motion without internal order leads to fatigue, not progress. The disciplined individual approaches the mind differently. They treat it as a controlled environment. Inputs are monitored. Repetition is intentional. Emotional energy is directed rather than wasted. Over time, the workshop becomes efficient. Ideas move from concept to execution with less friction. The first function of the mental workshop is selection. Not every thought deserves attention. Not every impulse should be acted upon. The mind generates thousands of signals daily, but only a fraction are useful. Without selection, the workshop becomes a storage room instead of a production facility. Selection begins with awareness. When you observe your thinking without immediately engaging with it, you gain control. You begin noticing patterns, recurring doubts, automatic fears, habitual assumptions. Many of these are not original. They were absorbed from environment, upbringing, or repeated exposure to limitation. Awareness interrupts automation. Once a thought is observed, It can be evaluated. Does it support growth or undermine it? Does it lead to action or hesitation? Does it clarify or confuse? Thoughts that fail these tests do not belong in the workshop. Removal is not suppression, it is maintenance. Just as a craftsman clears debris before beginning work, the disciplined mind removes mental clutter regularly. This does not require force, only consistency. Unproductive thoughts lose strength when they are denied repetition. The second function of the workshop is assembly. Ideas do not arrive complete. They form gradually through combination. A concept connects with experience. Experience connects with observation. Observation connects with insight. Over time, structure emerges. This process requires quiet. Assembly cannot happen in a distracted environment. Constant stimulation interrupts the brain's ability to connect information meaningfully. This is why clarity often arrives in moments of stillness, during walks, rest, or solitude. Silence allows parts to align. When external input is reduced, internal processing increases. The mind begins integrating information instead of merely consuming it. Patterns become visible. Solutions surface without strain. What once felt complex becomes simple, not because the problem changed, but because the internal structure improved. The third function of the workshop is reinforcement. Nothing becomes stable without repetition. One correct thought does not override years of conditioning. It must be installed through consistent exposure and emotional reinforcement. This is where most people fail, not from lack of knowledge, but from lack of persistence. The mind accepts what it hears repeatedly, especially when emotion is present. This is not belief, it is function. Whatever is impressed consistently becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to feel true. What feels true directs behavior. This sequence operates whether you are aware of it or not. Fear follows this same process. So does confidence. The difference is intention. A disciplined individual chooses what to reinforce. They do not wait for motivation. They establish patterns. Certain thoughts are repeated daily, not out of hope, but out of understanding. Over time, these thoughts become default responses. Default responses shape destiny. The workshop also operates most effectively when the conscious mind is less dominant. Excessive analysis interferes with integration. This is why insights often appear when effort is relaxed, during rest, repetition, or routine activity. The subconscious is not creative in the abstract. It is obedient. It executes instructions based on repetition and emotional weight. It does not argue. It does not evaluate logic. It builds according to the blueprint it is given. If the blueprint is fear, it builds limitation. If the blueprint is certainty, it builds opportunity. Most people unknowingly provide conflicting blueprints. They speak confidence but rehearse doubt internally. They desire progress but emotionally reinforce hesitation. The workshop receives mixed instructions and produces unstable results. Consistency resolves this. When thought, emotion, and repetition align, the workshop becomes powerful. Results begin appearing with less effort, not because effort disappears, but because resistance does. This is often mistaken for luck. It is not. It is internal order expressing externally. The mind also responds to identity. Behavior follows self-perception. A person who sees themselves as capable moves differently than one who does not. Identity is not changed through affirmation alone. It changes through repeated evidence. This is why small, private wins matter. Each disciplined action reinforces a new self-image. Each kept promise strengthens internal trust. Over time, the workshop updates its assumptions about what is possible. Once identity shifts, behavior follows naturally. The person no longer forces discipline. They embody it. This chapter introduces the second law. The mind builds whatever it is repeatedly instructed to build, regardless of your conscious wishes. Silence protects the workshop. Focus organizes it. Repetition programs it. Together, they create momentum that appears effortless from the outside and feels inevitable on the inside. Before moving forward, this understanding must be solid. Without mental order, strategy collapses. Without reinforcement, insight fades. Without discipline, silence becomes stagnation. Chapter 3. Alignment and Attraction. Effort alone does not create momentum. Alignment does. Most people are taught that success is something to be chased, pursued through constant action, pressure, and urgency. They are told that if they push hard enough, something will eventually give. Sometimes it does, often it doesn't, and even when it does, the results are fragile, temporary, or exhausting to maintain. Force can produce movement. It rarely produces stability. Alignment works differently. When internal systems are organized, thought, emotion, identity, and expectation, the external world begins responding with less resistance. Opportunities appear at the right moment. People arrive without pursuit. Decisions feel cleaner. Progress becomes steadier. This is not mysticism. It is coherence. Coherence occurs when internal signals stop contradicting each other. When desire, belief, and behavior point in the same direction, energy stops leaking. What once required strain now requires timing. What once felt like struggle now feels like sequence. Misalignment is expensive. A person can want abundance but expect disappointment. They can plan for growth but emotionally rehearse failure. They can speak ambition while internally identifying as unqualified. These contradictions create friction. The world responds with delays, missed connections, and repeated obstacles, not as punishment, but as reflection. Reality mirrors internal order. When internal alignment improves, the mirror changes. This is where attraction is misunderstood. Attraction is not wishing. It is not visualization without structure. It is not passive optimism. Attraction is the natural pull created when internal consistency becomes strong enough to influence external variables. Aligned systems generate gravity. People trust those who are internally stable. Opportunities move toward those who are not desperate. Resources flow more easily to those who are not forcing outcomes. This is not coincidence. It is response. Desperation repels. Certainty attracts. Certainty does not require arrogance. It requires calm. It is visible in posture, speech, timing, and restraint. Aligned individuals do not rush decisions because they are not afraid of missing everything. They know movement will occur because their internal state is prepared to receive it. The unaligned individual feels constant urgency. They chase multiple paths at once. They over-explain. They react emotionally to delays. Their energy scatters, and with it, their influence. They mistake speed for progress and activity for effectiveness. Alignment slows the process initially, but accelerates results later. This is why silence remains critical at this stage. Alignment forms internally before it expresses externally. Talking too soon reintroduces external influence, which can disrupt internal coherence. The world does not need to know what you are aligning. It only needs to see the outcome. Alignment also changes perception. Once internal order improves, you begin noticing opportunities that were previously invisible. This is not because they did not exist, but because attention was scattered. Focus sharpens perception. You cannot act on what you do not notice. Aligned individuals appear lucky because they recognize patterns faster. They sense timing better. They know when to act and when to wait. This sensitivity is developed through internal quiet and disciplined attention. Force ignores timing. Alignment respects it. When you stop forcing outcomes, you begin cooperating with sequence. Events unfold in the correct order instead of being rushed prematurely. This reduces error, conflict, and wasted effort. Many failures occur not because the goal was wrong, but because the timing was. Alignment corrects timing automatically. It also improves decision-making under pressure. When internal signals are coherent, choices feel simpler. You are not debating with yourself constantly. The right move feels obvious, not because it is easy, but because it aligns with your internal structure. This clarity is invaluable. People with clarity waste less time explaining themselves. They do not seek consensus for personal decisions. They trust their process because it is internally verified. This trust becomes visible. Others sense it and respond accordingly. Partnerships form more smoothly. Negotiations stabilize. Resistance decreases, not because you are controlling others, but because your internal order reduces external friction. Alignment does not eliminate obstacles. It changes how obstacles behave. Challenges become instructional rather than discouraging. Setbacks become adjustments rather than defeats. You respond instead of react. Emotional neutrality increases effectiveness. This emotional regulation is a major component of attraction. The world responds more favorably to those who are not emotionally volatile. Calm communicates capability. Stability invites responsibility. Trust follows predictability. This is why aligned individuals are often given opportunities without requesting them. They are seen as safe investments. Alignment also strengthens patience. When you trust internal direction, waiting does not feel like stagnation. It feels like preparation. You stop forcing movement and start refining position. Position matters more than speed. A person in the right position needs less effort to move forward. A person in the wrong position exhausts themselves compensating. Alignment places you correctly. This chapter introduces the third law. When internal order becomes stable, external resistance decreases naturally. You do not chase outcomes. You position yourself so outcomes come to you. This is not passive. It requires discipline, restraint, and consistency. But it replaces strain with precision. Chapter 4. The danger of exposure. Exposure before readiness is not confidence. It is leakage. Most people believe that speaking about their plans strengthens commitment. They assume that once something is announced, it becomes real. In truth, the opposite often occurs. What is spoken too early begins to lose its force, not because intention disappears, but because energy escapes into explanation. Creation requires containment. When an idea is first formed, it is fragile. It has not yet survived resistance, execution, or failure. At this stage, it exists mostly as potential. Potential requires protection. Exposure invites interference. Interference does not need to be hostile to be destructive. Well-meaning opinions dilute clarity. Casual skepticism introduces hesitation. Questions force justification. Justification turns inward focus outward. The idea, once growing quietly, is now defending itself instead of developing. Defense slows growth. Every explanation divides attention. Every response to doubt requires energy that could have been used to refine execution. Over time, the plan weakens, not from lack of desire, but from excessive visibility. Exposure also triggers psychological release. When you speak about a goal publicly, the mind often interprets that as partial completion. You feel a sense of progress without having produced anything tangible. This false reward reduces urgency. The internal drive softens. Motivation declines quietly. This is why many people feel productive after talking, but accomplish little afterward. The mind cannot easily distinguish between expression and execution. Silence preserves tension. That tension, the unresolved pressure between intention and reality, is necessary. It fuels focus. It sharpens attention. Once released through speech, it must be rebuilt. Rebuilding costs time. Exposure also invites comparison. Once your plan exists in public space, it is measured against others. You begin adjusting timelines, scope, or ambition to appear reasonable. What began as a personal standard becomes a social one. Social standards are almost always lower. The need to be understood weakens originality. The need to be accepted limits risk. The need to explain reduces boldness. Silence avoids all three. The disciplined individual understands that not everyone deserves access to unfinished work. This is not arrogance. It is preservation. Ideas require solitude to mature. Even criticism that is technically accurate can be destructive if delivered too early. Timing matters more than correctness. An idea exposed before it has structure cannot absorb feedback productively. Instead of improving, it fragments. Instead of evolving, it stalls. This is why experienced builders isolate during early stages. Writers draft in private. Engineers prototype quietly. Strategists plan without announcement. Exposure comes later, when structure can withstand it. Another danger of exposure is emotional contamination. Once others know your intention, their expectations attach themselves to it. Their timelines, the doubts, their excitement, their impatience, all of it enters your internal environment. You are no longer working alone. You are managing reactions. This creates pressure that has nothing to do with progress. You begin measuring success by response rather than result. Anxiety increases. Focus decreases. Decision-making becomes reactive. Silence removes this burden. In silence, failure is instructional, not embarrassing. Adjustments are private, not public. You are free to refine without explanation. Exposure also weakens authority. The person who talks frequently about future success appears uncertain. They are asking to be believed. The person who speaks only after results appear does not ask. Their authority is assumed. Authority is not claimed. It is recognized. The world respects outcomes, not intentions. Silence allows outcomes to arrive unannounced. This chapter introduces the fourth law. What is revealed before it is ready must defend itself, and defense consumes power. Silence is not secrecy for its own sake. It is strategic timing. It is knowing when to speak and when to withhold. The disciplined individual speaks when silence has completed its work. Chapter 5. Installing certainty. Certainty is not emotion. It is structure. Most people mistake certainty for confidence or enthusiasm. They wait to feel ready before acting. They assume belief appears first and action follows. In reality, certainty is installed gradually through repetition, evidence, and emotional regulation. It is built, not summoned. The mind does not obey desire. It obeys familiarity. Whatever you repeat, thoughts, behaviors, reactions, becomes familiar. What becomes familiar begins to feel normal. What feels normal becomes automatic. This is how certainty forms. It is not dramatic. It is quiet, steady, and cumulative. This is why sudden motivation rarely lasts. Intensity without repetition fades. Excitement without structure collapses. Certainty requires systems that operate even when emotion fluctuates. The first element of certainty is consistency. Small, repeated actions carry more influence than rare, extreme efforts. The mind trusts patterns, not promises. Each repeated behavior sends a signal. This is who we are now. Identity follows behavior. When you act in alignment repeatedly, even in minor ways, the internal image updates. Over time, the question shifts from "can I do this?" to "why would I not?" This shift is subtle but decisive. The second element of certainty is emotional neutrality. Extreme emotional swings weaken conviction. When progress excites you excessively and setbacks devastate you, internal stability disappears. Certainty requires emotional steadiness. Calm reinforces trust. The mind interprets calm action as safety. When you continue executing without emotional drama, the subconscious accepts the process as reliable. Reliability builds certainty. This is why disciplined individuals appear unshaken. They do not attach identity to daily outcomes. They commit to process, not performance. Wins do not inflate them. Losses do not define them. Emotional restraint preserves energy. The third element of certainty is repetition of thought. Thoughts repeated with consistency become internal instruction. This does not require affirmation or optimism. It requires precision. Vague repetition produces vague results. Clear internal statements repeated calmly begin shaping expectation. Expectation influences perception. Perception guides action. Action reinforces identity. This loop builds certainty organically. Certainty also depends on environment. Inputs matter. Conversations matter. Exposure matters. A person cannot install certainty while constantly absorbing doubt. Silence remains critical, not as isolation, but as filtration. Not every voice deserves access to your attention. The disciplined individual curates input carefully. They protect mental space. They reduce unnecessary consumption. They prioritize clarity over stimulation. This reduces internal conflict. Certainty collapses when internal instructions contradict each other. One part of the mind cannot be told to advance while another is rehearsing retreat. Clarity eliminates contradiction. Another critical factor is time. Certainty cannot be rushed. The mind requires repeated proof. Each completed action, each maintained habit, each quiet improvement adds weight. Weight stabilizes belief. Eventually, belief no longer needs reinforcement. It becomes default. Doubt loses its grip not because it is fought, but because it is outnumbered. This is how permanence is achieved. Certainty also alters communication. When certainty is installed, speech changes. Words become fewer. Explanations shorten. Tone steadies. You no longer convince. You inform. This signals authority. Others respond differently when certainty is present. Trust increases. Resistance decreases. Opportunities appear without persuasion. Not because you demand them, but because your internal stability makes cooperation feel safe. This chapter introduces the fifth law. What you repeat calmly and consistently becomes unquestioned reality. Certainty is not loud. It does not announce itself. It operates. Chapter 6. Embodied authority. Authority is not asserted. It is detected. The moment certainty becomes stable internally, it begins to express itself externally. This expression is not deliberate performance. It is behavioral alignment. The body, voice, timing, and decisions all begin reflecting internal order. This is embodied authority. Most people attempt to act confident before they become grounded. They adopt posture, language, or image without internal coherence. The result feels forced. Others sense the disconnect immediately. True authority requires no effort. It appears in restraint, in patience, in the refusal to rush or over-explain. When internal systems are aligned, behavior simplifies. You do less, but each action carries more weight. Embodied authority changes how you move through situations. You listen more than you speak. You respond instead of reacting. You choose silence where others seek attention. This is not strategy. It is consequence. You no longer need external validation, so your behavior stops asking for it. This alone alters how people treat you. People trust those who are not trying to impress them. They defer to those who are not desperate for agreement. Calmness communicates preparation. This is why authority often looks unassuming. It does not interrupt. It waits. Timing becomes precise. You speak when it matters. You act when conditions align. You decline opportunities that do not fit. This selectivity increases perceived value. Scarcity increases respect. Not artificial scarcity, but genuine selectivity. When your time, attention, and energy are clearly governed, others adapt to your rhythm. Embodied authority also reshapes boundaries. You stop negotiating internally about what you will tolerate. Decisions become clearer. Compromises are intentional rather than habitual. You no longer explain boundaries. You enforce them quietly through action. This reduces conflict. Most conflict arises from unclear standards. When standards are embodied, not spoken, they are respected automatically. Authority also affects decision-making under pressure. When internal systems are stable, urgency does not override judgment. You do not rush to resolve discomfort. You allow situations to unfold until clarity appears. This patience often reveals options others miss. People who rush reveal their leverage. People who wait maintain it. Embodied authority also alters risk tolerance. You no longer take reckless risks to prove yourself. Nor do you avoid risk out of fear. You assess calmly. You act deliberately. Risk becomes measured rather than emotional. This increases success rate. Losses are absorbed without identity damage. Wins are integrated without ego inflation. This emotional equilibrium reinforces trust, both internally and externally. The world responds to embodied authority by offering responsibility. People involve you in decisions. They seek your input. They assume competence. This happens without self-promotion. Authority attracts demand. Not attention, but reliance. This chapter introduces the sixth law. When internal certainty stabilizes, behavior simplifies and influence increases naturally. You are no longer managing perception. You are expressing alignment. Chapter 7. The Long Silence. Success is loud only in its early stages. Power remains quiet. Most people believe that once results appear, silence is no longer necessary. They think visibility confirms legitimacy. They think explanation protects position. In reality, the opposite is true. The moment success is exposed excessively, it begins to weaken. Noise attracts pressure. When results become public, expectations multiply. Opinions increase. Demands grow. Every word is analyzed. Every decision is judged. The focus shifts from creation to maintenance of image. This transition is where many decline. The disciplined individual understands that silence is not a phase, it is a principle. It does not end when results appear. It deepens. The long silence is not secrecy. It is restraint. Restraint preserves energy. It prevents unnecessary engagement. It protects clarity. It ensures that attention remains on process rather than applause. Applause is costly. It trains the mind to seek reaction instead of alignment. It shifts motivation outward. Over time, this weakens internal authority. Decisions begin catering to perception rather than principle. Silence prevents this drift. Those who maintain power long-term rarely explain their methods publicly. They allow outcomes to speak. They resist the urge to narrate their journey in real time. Narration interrupts momentum. When you speak constantly about success, you begin managing expectations instead of direction. Silence removes this burden. The long silence also protects humility. Visibility inflates ego if left unchecked. Ego clouds judgment. Judgment errors compound quickly at higher levels of influence. Silence grounds identity. It reminds you that results are temporary, but discipline is permanent. It keeps attention on what must be maintained, not what has been achieved. Longevity requires boredom tolerance. The ability to repeat fundamentals without novelty. The willingness to maintain standards without applause. The discipline to remain consistent after excitement fades. Most people fail here. They grow restless. They seek stimulation. They introduce complexity where simplicity was working. Silence stabilizes against this impulse. The long silence also preserves leverage. The less you explain, the more unpredictable you remain. Predictability invites exploitation. Restraint maintains advantage. This is not manipulation. It is boundary management. You are not required to share process, motive, or future direction. Privacy is not deception. It is sovereignty. The most stable positions are the least exposed. Silence also reinforces internal trust. When you no longer narrate your progress, you stop outsourcing validation. You rely on internal standards. This self-reliance is the final form of authority. You no longer need confirmation. At this stage, success feels quieter than expected. There is less excitement and more calm. Less urgency and more clarity. This is not decline, it is maturity. Power matures into stillness. The world notices this stillness even if it does not understand it. It feels grounded. It feels permanent. It feels unshakable. If you're still listening, this channel is for you. Subscribe and comment, listening, to mark your discipline.